Welcome everybody. This is the 10th KeraClub. It's great to be here and I hope you find this session informative and valuable. I'd like to begin by recognising and paying respects to the elders and communities past, present and emerging of the lands that the University of Sydney campuses stand on. For thousands of years, they have shared and exchanged knowledges across innumerable generations for the benefit of all. Now, during this webinar, there'll be opportunity for question and answer at the end. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the Zoom. The webinar will also be recorded and it'll be available afterwards on YouTube, and we'll let you know via email. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Michelle Pritchard. She's the moderator today. She's an internationally recognized violinist who's pursuing her lifelong dream, a career in music. She's currently based in the Netherlands, where it might be snowing, and she has just released her debut album through Zephyr Records with the apt name Vision. It is deeply entwined with her personal journey, a story of struggle, resilience, and renewed clarity, which the album embodies in its themes of artistry, transformation, and rediscovered vision. Thanks for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and good evening, everybody. And as Stephanie has already said, this is our 10th KeraClub. What used to be in person has become a webinar over the years, which enables us to reach a further audience. It's such a pleasure to have you all tonight to celebrate this incredible milestone. KeraClub is a joint initiative between Keratoconus Australia and the Save Sight Institute. It's created to connect patients, carers, clinicians and researchers, and to remind everyone affected by keratoconus that we're part of a strong and supportive community. As someone who lives with keratoconus, I know how valuable it is to have a space like this. We can learn from the experts that are very generously sharing their time today. We can share our own experiences. We have patients who also speak. And we all then know that we're not alone on this journey. We're honoured to be joined tonight by Professor Stephanie Watson OAM, Dr. Himal Kandel, Martin Robinson, Larry Kornhauser OAM, Ruby Chan, Tiffney Nesakumar, Ethan Wilkinson, Clare Smith and Amanda Craze, as well as all of you tonight who make this KeraClub such a meaningful community. So thank you for being here and helping us mark this 10th KeraClub, a celebration of connection, resilience and shared hope for everyone living with keratoconus. What we are going to have tonight is some polls that will come on your screen, and Himal will kindly launch a poll. Could you please answer that? And whilst we are doing that, I'm also going to introduce our next speaker, who is Himal Kandel himself. Dr. Himal Kandel has been the Kornhauser Research Fellow at the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry since January 2019, after completing his PhD at Flinders University, Adelaide. Dr. Kandel has published over 110 research papers in reputed journals and has a special interest in patient-reported outcomes research. His research seeks to answer real-world questions in keratoconus management using the world's first Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. Dr. Kandel is passionate about mentoring and guiding the next generation of researchers in this important field. Welcome, Himal, and thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for the kind introduction. The Save Sight Keratoconus Registry is a large international database of patients with keratoconus, both untreated and those managed with various interventions. It includes data on clinical outcomes as well as patient-reported outcomes. Currently, data are contributed by over 130 clinicians in 8 countries from over 9,500 eyes in keratoconus. The registry has become a powerful clinical tool, helping clinicians to monitor keratoconus progression and to evaluate outcomes of different treatments. It's also been a rich resource, helping us better understand keratoconus and its impact on patients. The slides shows the 10 papers our team published in 2024 and 2025. These cover a wide range of topics from trends in keratoconus management to comparisons of different corneal cross-linking protocols. and quality of life research, which remains at the heart of what we do. We have also conducted studies to identify predictors of progression, and more recently have explored innovative areas such as artificial intelligence in keratoconus research. In general, our research approach is systematic. We first review existing evidence through systematic reviews, identify gaps in the knowledge, and then conduct primary studies using data from the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry to address those gaps. And today, I'm going to highlight the findings from 3 of the 10 listed studies here. In the first study, we investigated whether intra-eye differences could predict keratoconus progression in untreated patients. We analyzed data from about 2,200 patients. Of these, 333 patients showed keratoconus progression. We found that younger age and greater intra-eye asymmetry in Kmax were significant predictors of progression. Based on this, we recommended that patients with higher asymmetry be monitored more closely in both eyes, as they may be at greater risk of worsening disease. The second study compared epi-on and epi-off corneal cross-linking. There were 46 eyes in the epi-on group and over 1,200 eyes in the epi-off group, which is the more standard procedure. At 12 months follow-up, there were no significant differences between the two groups in changes in visual acuity, corneal curvature, and minimum corneal thickness. However, the smaller sample size in the epi-on group and relatively short follow-up period are the limitations of this study, and we plan to address this in future long-term studies. The third study, which has been recently accepted for publication, examined the trends in keratoconus management in Australia. We used multiple data sources, including the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, Australian Corneal Graft Registry, and MBS data. We observed that the number of corneal grafts performed for keratoconus has decreased over time, as you can see in the graph as well. Meanwhile, cross-linking procedures have increased, particularly among males and patients aged 15 to 24 years, although there is considerable variation between the states. The use of rigid gas permeable and scleral lenses has doubled over the past 30 years. These findings highlight the changing landscape of keratoconus management in Australia and underscore the importance of monitoring outcomes taking into account these trends. I want to thank all our supporters and collaborators who make this research possible. Together, through the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, we are continuing to generate real-world evidence that helps improve care and outcomes for people living with keratoconus. Thank you.
Thank you, Himal, for bringing us up to speed with all of your incredible work that you do every year. You must just be so incredibly busy with what you're doing. Our next speaker tonight is Martin Robinson. Being in the graduate class of 1994 from QUT, Martin originally worked in country Queensland. This included fly-in and fly-out work in concert with Dr. Gary Bryan of the Fred Hollows Foundation Remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Communities. He also worked with corneal surgeons fitting RGP contact lenses to post-graft corneas. In 2006, he made his way south to Hobart for a slower pace of life. Since 2009, he's been owner and principal optometrist in his own independent optometry practice and has a keen interest in contact lenses and dry eye diseases. He's worked closely with ophthalmologists and oncologists, helping diagnose and treat their dry eye patients. Martin writes a regular column for the Cornea and Contact Lens Society of Australia, CCLSA, has spoken at state, national and international conferences, and has published DED CPD pieces for optometrists and ophthalmologists. Since 2017, he's been Tasmanian State President of the CCLSA, and in 2022, he was elected as National President of the CCLSA. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you so much for that. So let's see if we'll share this screen, make sure it's working. Perfect. Okay. From beginning. There we go. Perfect. So thank you for that kind introduction. My passion about being an optometrist is to help anybody get their maximum vision potential, and there's no group which this is more important in than sufferers of keratoconus, because it's one of the most tricky things to try and manage and maximize vision. So often people, when they get diagnosed and they're young and they're early, they're asking me what sort of things, what are our options? And the answers are everything is an option. You know, whatever works is what works, and whatever the simplest thing that works is what we go for, or whatever you wish to go for is what we go for. So anything from spectacles to soft contact lenses to specialty soft contact lenses or soft toric lenses, they're all, you know, really good options. What I've spent most of my life and most of my career fitting are corneal hard lenses, or corneal RGP lenses, and they can be everything from spherical lenses, front and back surface toric lenses, which is where we put power in different places to try and maximize the vision if there's a residual problem and that the contact lens itself doesn't mask the vision, and bitorics, which get more complicated, and the new generation ones which are freeform as well. And then there's piggyback combinations where we're using soft disposable contact lenses and RGPs as well. And then there's larger scale corneal lenses, which I use a little bit, and then the scleral that I use a little bit, and hybrid that I use occasionally. So my mantra with all my patients and when I teach other optometrists is healthy lids lead to happy contact lenses. You know, so if you don't look after the ocular surface, then you're going to have contact lenses that don't wet well, and mean you don't see well, and it increases your allergic response, and it really increases the inflammatory response as well. So if I hit play on this little video, this is a contact lens that's not wetting properly, and it's not wetting properly partly because of lid problems, partly because of poor tear quality, partly because of poor cleaning as well, all of which I try and address with my patients, but they're all things that I think as optometrists we need to do a bit better with. So that's part of my education push that I do. So these two photos are really evidence of what happens when I get sent patients to me for contact lens reviews or refits. Both of these people have got quite bad blepharitis and very bad inflammation called ocular rosacea, the top photo in particular. And they've both been recently fitted with new contact lenses, and they were sent to me to have a troubleshoot it. But their lids looked terrible. So that's the first thing that I do, is assess the outside of the eye and make sure things are okay before I start playing with contact lenses. So what sort of things have we got available for that? There's lots of things for home care. There's things like tea tree foams, which are things like Blephadex, which are available in pharmacy, and there's Oost, which is often available in optometry places. There's Ocusoft Platinum foam for things that aren't Demodex related, which Demodex are mites that live in the eyelids, and they're major allergy pushers and things. There's also Zocular products, which are ochre-based products, and there's also hypochlorous acid type products, which control bacteria. In terms of what we can do in clinic, in practice, we have Blefex devices to try and clean and debride all the debris off the lashes. And the new thing that we've got is Zest, which is an ochre-based in-clinic treatment. This is a short video of Zest, and Zest is basically a way to try and clear blepharitis away and reduce allergy response, reduce allergic and inflammatory markers in the tear film as well. And it's using an ochre gel to cleanse the outside of the eye by doing a bit of a scrub, which this little video is highlighting. And that cleans things like biofilm away, it kills Demodex, it reduces inflammation, it's analgesic, and it's anti-inflammatory. So it's a bit of an amazing thing. We don't need to use anesthetic. It comes in a little steri pack, and it does an amazing job at cleaning. These next two pictures are also patients that were sent to me for refitting with problem contact lenses. And if you look at these eyes, what's going on? The eyelids look like there's a bit of extra makeup there, and I can tell you this lady hadn't worn mascara that day. So this is makeup that's residual from prior. They're very dry and scratched and dirty and not wetting contact lenses, and the eyes are really inflamed. So again, why wouldn't we treat the eye first before we try and manage and refit these contact lenses? So some of the things that I find most commonly with patients coming in is they may not have been told about protein treatment. Proteins in our tear film, proteins deposit on contact lenses, proteins cause anti-wetting of contact lenses and cause problems. So what we have for protein treatments, there's a couple of different things that are around today, because back 30 years ago, there were little tablets called Ultrazyme, which were enzymatic tablets, but they've been gone for a long time. So we've got Progent, which is a system which is a two-part mixing thing. So you're mixing part A and part B together, you soak your lenses for 30 minutes, and then you take them out, rinse them, and put them in your normal storing solution. And then there's Boston One Step, which is some drops that you put into your thing, and then that one's a 4-hour minimum, but preferably an overnight soak. But again, in the morning, you have to rinse that well off and clean it away. So to give you an idea on how cleaning can change the pathway, this these two videos, the one that's on the right side with the dirty contact lens is a patient that was sent to me for refitting with contact lenses, and they just paid all the money for the new contact lenses. They didn't want to spend more money on contact lenses. I didn't think the contact lens fitted well, but I knew I could make the contact lens cleaner and I could clean up the eyelids. So I cleaned up the eyelids. I gave them a new cleaning routine for their contact lenses, and that gave them another 18 months of wear out of that lens before I refitted them, which was the refit was the one that was on the other side. So managing the contact lens can reduce the cost factor for patients. You don't have to force a new contact lens on someone as long as it's clean and their eyelids are clean. And I think it's really important to give people options. So this is another patient that we've got going, and this is sort of the tail end of my talk, is just talking about this particular patient. There's lots of new technology out there to scan eyes, and one of the things that I've invested in is a pentacam wave, which is a device that most ophthalmologists have got to manage keratoconus, but we can use it to try and manage the cornea and the sclera to give us more options with fitting contact lenses. Is this going to make me fit more scleral lenses? And the answer is no, but it's going to make me fit more complicated corneas and with corneal lenses, and I'm already doing that currently, and that's what I'm trying to do for this chap. So this chap has been sent to me, and he's not able to wear spectacles that get him up to the legal drive limit. There's no soft contact lenses that have got his prescription. His astigmatism powers are something about minus 950 from memory. We've looked at lots of traditional corneal RGP lenses, and we've explored lots of those, and none of them looked like they were going to fit well. None of them looked like they're going to give me the vision that I'm chasing, so they were just complicated. And then we've had a look at some freeform corneal RGPs. We're using the pentacam scans and using some technology to create new generation lenses, and they look like they're going to work, and that's what we've ordered. We've also looked at scleral lenses as well, and freeform scleral lenses, but again, price is a bit of an issue. He's not at work at the moment. He's off work because he's had cross-linking done 6 months ago. He can't see well enough to do anything, so everything's a bit tight for him. So we go through all these options with the patient, we come up with an action plan, and then what we try and do with people that are in need is we try and work out a pricing structure. So this is an electronic lens designer, which we try and use, which can create a virtual contact lens that will fit onto a virtual three-dimensional plot or a scan of the eye as well. And with this, you can manage everything from the density of the contact lens to the to how thick it is, how balanced it is, and how stable it is, whether it's rotationally spinning or whether it's not going to move at all. And you can make sure the edge profile is soft and not going to cause any trauma on the eye as well. And you can change the diameter and the curves. And if that's not right, then you can modify it. And once you've had this lens designed and put on eye and you do a prescription, then you can do an over refraction and order a second contact lens, which is normally we sort of have two contact lenses to make these things work. This little video at the end shows how we can check various quadrants of the eye and various sections of the eye and see what they look like. So if I play this, it's just jumping around from vertical to nasal to temporal to superior, and we can check every meridian, and we can check that contact lens in each of those meridians, which means we've got a fair bit of ability to try and make a contact lens work on a very unusual cornea, which this young gentleman has got. So, so my final thoughts are, it's okay to feel frustrated. You know, I feel frustrated as an optometrist trying to fit patients sometimes. It's okay to feel frustrated as a patient when you've got something that's a special thing. You know, there are lots of things and lots of options you can search for contact lens care, and you can also find optometrists that specialise in keratoconus. The Contact Lens Society of Australia has a Find a Practitioner page, and you can type in keratoconus in that as a precursor, and it'll give you a list of people in your area that specialise or treat keratoconus. And I think those things are really good. One of the questions that came through as a pre-question before, if I just go to that, there was an 87-year-old chap who made a question about the fact that years ago we used to have contact lenses that were deeply tinted, and I remember those. I'm old enough to have fitted those sort of contact lenses, and they were darker browns and darker blues, and they made him easier for him to find his contact lenses if he dropped them. And the new contact lenses that he's got, although he loves them, he's losing quite a number of them because they're a lighter blue or a lighter green, and normally it's called a blue ice or a green, a light green colour, and they are a little harder to see. And the new materials that we're using today, so they don't take tint well. So we can still tint old materials, but they're not healthy for the eye. So the new materials that that are healthy for the eye don't tint very well. So I hope I've answered that question a little bit, and hopefully can get to the more in the Q&A later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Martin, for what is always a very difficult thing to fit us as keratoconus patients. And this looks like this is getting easier and easier with the technology and with your expertise as well, which is fantastic. As Martin also mentioned, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting to submit your questions, and we're going to have a panel discussion after we finish with our speakers. So if you could please do that. And we've also got another poll. So this poll is going to be talking to someone with keratoconus, and Himal's just going to launch that. If you can answer that, that would be great. And in the meantime, I'm going to introduce our next important speaker, Larry Kornhauser. Larry was diagnosed with keratoconus at the age of at age 12, and received a corneal transplant at 18. He went on to complete a Bachelor of Economics with honours and later a Diploma of French language while living in France. In 2023, he completed a Certificate of Public Health and Eye Sector Leadership. Larry worked for over 35 years as an economic journalist and translator for a range of international organisations and various economic journals, and he now manages his family business. Larry has travelled extensively, played many sports, loves music, Indian food and echidnas, and raises 3 children. In 1999, Larry helped create Keratoconus Australia and became its inaugural president, a position he still holds today. He's an incredible man. He spoke about his experiences with keratoconus and passion for peer support in the recent Talking Eyes podcast, which can be found on YouTube and other platforms. Highly recommended. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Michelle. That's very kind. Well, good evening, everybody. This year marks the 25th anniversary of Keratoconus Australia and also of my tenure as president. It's been a great honour to lead our modest support group over such a long period. And tonight, I'd like to just highlight some of our achievements over the past quarter of a century. The association was founded in 2000 to change the way patients understood and managed their disease and also their relationships with their eye carers. Coincidentally, we arrived at the dawn of a new age in keratoconus that has utterly changed the course of the disease and its outcomes, despite the fact that its origins remain largely a mystery. From the outset, we recognised the importance of these seismic shifts, and we refused to sit on the sidelines as passive observers. Instead, we made sure that patients had an independent voice in those changes and became active partners in the new research and treatment landscape. We began by making support for patients our primary concern. Although initially sceptical about the need for a patient group, I soon discovered that peer support is life-changing for both the receiver and the giver. Helping others who share your own struggle is deeply rewarding. It created the passion within me that explains why I've stayed on for so long. It taught me so much about others and their experiences, and unearthed many of the fears about my own sight that I'd suppressed for so long. We've supported thousands of people and their families over the past 25 years. I think we've made a difference to their lives. We've talked for hours with them, exchanged countless emails. We've swapped war stories and laughed with them, and many times we've cried with them too. We talk mainly to people in trouble with their vision, people looking for advice, people looking for more competent eye carers, looking for empathy, somebody who simply understands what they're seeing or not. These are the canaries in the coal mine. They're the ones who highlight what's wrong with our keratoconus healthcare systems. Sometimes their experience can skew our opinions, but we'd be failing our mission statement to dismiss them. We're not just here for the happy majority, but also for the ignored minority. Providing support created our superpower, a database that includes a treasure trove of information about the eye health of our members, all kept securely under privacy laws and away from third parties, of course. But with information of over 3,000 members today, that database gives us credibility, gives us a seat at the table when we seek to advocate on behalf of patients for more accessible and affordable treatments. When we speak, at least people listen, even if they don't always do what we'd like. The database has also been critical in involving us in the design of research to meet patient needs. It enabled us to recruit patient volunteers for most of the major Australian research projects into keratoconus since 2000, research that has transformed our world. For example, we helped fund and recruit volunteers for the world's first randomised clinical study of corneal cross-linking, conducted in Melbourne in 2006 by the Centre for Eye Research Australia. That study proved up the safety and efficacy of cross-linking, the only treatment ever shown to slow or halt disease progression. Its results launched the biggest advance in the history of keratoconus. In 2015, we helped fund and launch the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry to gather real-world evidence on cross-linking and patient outcomes. That data convinced the Australian government in 2018 to fund cross-linking through Medicare, transforming the lives of thousands of people. In 2017, we supported development of keratoconus-specific quality of life questionnaire, the QORC, which is now the global standard for patient quality of life studies. It's used by the registry, and that showed that keratoconus has a greater impact on the quality of life than macular degeneration and retinal disease. More groundbreaking research. And we even use our database to recruit volunteers for a keratoconus training clinic for Melbourne University optometry students that we created in 2006, another first in Australia. I may be president, but I've tried to let our members lead us. They're the ones who direct our advocacy efforts. Some examples. Members like Kevin from Darwin, who alerted us more than 20 years ago how the cost of contact lenses, which are almost entirely self-funded by patients in Australia, was proving a serious barrier to restoring sight. His story sparked our long campaign around affordability of treatments and especially contact lenses. Sadly, we've gone backwards on this critical issue as the price of specialty contact lenses has more than tripled in the past decade. And then there was Debbie, a police officer from Adelaide, who vented to us about her optometrist, who'd never told her about the suspected link between eye rubbing and keratoconus. She taught us the importance of informing people of the dangers ourselves. Ever since, we've distributed flyers on eye rubbing to members. We need to. 2/3 of our new members in the past decade say they have vigorously rubbed their eyes. So more needs to be done. Then there was Angelo from Melbourne, who alerted us back in 2005 to the serious mental health issues arising in young people. For years, he and I debated keratoconus and its impact on patients after his corneal transplant at 19. He stumbled many times, but ultimately was inspired by Professor Ron McCallum, who was blind yet became Dean of Law at Sydney University. On hearing of Professor McCallum, Angelo wrote to me these words: "A person who achieves despite the odds can be the most powerful inspiration to go out and take on the world, irrespective of perceived limitations. In that way, we ask, if she can do it, why can't I?" Of course, there are many reasons why a person may not be able to do it. Angelo knows well. He went on to become a university law lecturer and has written on discrimination, social origin, class, and disability. And based on the experience of Angelo, Jeff from Canberra, and so many others, we petitioned Vision 2020 Australia to create a mental health resource for people with vision impairment, something that didn't exist. Today, we chair that working party, which was formed in 2022. With knowledge comes power. We improve patient knowledge through our free new member kits, which include material on keratoconus, the dangers of our eye rubbing, and our new patient's guide to cross-linking. We built a website to meet the urgent need for readily accessible, reliable information. We included a helpline so patients could easily ask their questions via email or phone. We collaborated with keratoconus specialists to answer these questions. We set up social media accounts. And we were 20 years ahead of the COVID switch online and didn't miss a beat when the virus closed so many other institutions and not-for-profits. Members have also created a Facebook page where Australians could go for local based support. And all of these initiatives, along with the international support forums, have helped create a sense of community for patients. But we wanted more, a dialogue with eye carers and researchers too. This started with our public information seminars, first the Demystifying Keratoconus meetings and later KeraClub. And thanks to these seminars, for the first time ever, patients were able to connect and interact with keratoconus experts outside of their consulting rooms. I think that's been transformative for both patients and eye carers. And some of the biggest names in keratoconus have presented at these meetings. Obviously, Professor Watson and Dr. Kandel, who created the Save Sight Registry, but also Professor Grant Snibson and Dr. Christine Wittig, who ran the SERA study of cross-linking in 2006. Professor Doug Costa, who founded the Corneal Graft Registry in the late 1980s, another global first. He certainly opened my eyes to the wonders of evidence-based medicine. Dr. Elsie Chan, who rocked the world with her group's finding in 2019 that keratoconus prevalence in Australia could be as high as 1 in 84, affecting over 300,000 Australians, a finding that overturned all conventional wisdom that keratoconus was a rare disease. Then there was Dr. Mark Roth, an Australian expert in eye allergies and dry eye, leading optometrists such as Martin Robinson tonight, Professor Richard Voilet, Richard Lindsay, Jim Kokonakis, Margaret Lamb, all providing their wisdom for successful contact lens wear. And then, of course, there was the brilliant John Mountford, who gave the most enthralling presentation on contact lenses I've ever heard. John designed the RGPs and scleral lenses many of us wear today. These and many others would be keynote speakers at any international conference, yet they offered their time and wisdom and insights to patients in Australia for the first time ever. And shock horror, then engaged in a dialogue with patients during lively Q&A sessions. All of this has been recorded and made available to people around Australia, initially in DVD form, and now we can go around the world via live stream and YouTube. We've done all of this on an annual budget of about $10,000 to $15,000 a year, funded entirely by private donors, an extraordinary achievement that reflects the incredible efforts of all our many volunteers. But today we're at the crossroads. Since COVID, funding and volunteer streams have dried up. We will need to secure funding now from government and corporate partnerships to sustain a new staff-operated model, and we're working on it. So yes, keratoconus can rob us of sight, but not our potential. Today, we've more treatments than ever to restore functional vision. Cross-linking, scleral and other specialty lenses, better surgery, all offer new options and hope. Our challenge has been always to help people access these options at an affordable price. And many clinicians and researchers still call us keratoconics, making us sound like aliens, but we're not. We're people with keratoconus. We shouldn't be defined by our eye disease. We can do anything once our vision has been corrected. It's their mission to make that happen, and the best of them do that. We love our eye carers for making that effort, because we can be really hard work sometimes. But our mission remains to support patients through that transformation back to sight and to inspire by our actions so that people with keratoconus always think to themselves, well, if they can do it, so can I. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, for giving us such an incredible overview of what I feel is one of the most valuable things that we have as keratoconus patients, and all of the community work that you do and the talks that you have with the professionals. And it is really such a valuable resource that we have, and I hope we can all take something with us today and think about what we might be able to do to be able to contribute to help such a valuable resource. We're now going to have another poll, however, and this one is about affordability and outcomes. And whilst you fill that in, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Ruby Chan is a final year medical student at the University of Wollongong with a strong interest in ophthalmology, particularly cornea and glaucoma. She's keen to build on her experience as both an active researcher and a developing clinician, having undertaken clinical and research training across Sydney, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Ruby has presented her work both locally and internationally and is the recipient of several academic awards, including the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Grant, AOA/GSM Scholarship, and Rosita King Ho Scholarship. She is passionate about advancing equitable access to ophthalmic care and contributing to innovations that improve patient outcomes. She continues to seek opportunities to expand her experience in clinical ophthalmology and research collaboration. Thank you, Ruby.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for the introduction. Okay, just checking that the screen is working correctly. So thank you for tuning into my talk, everybody. And I'm happy to introduce my topic, which is social determinants and disparities in keratoconus. And this review was supported by Dr. Kandel and Professor Watson. So first of all, what is a social determinant? So social determinant of health are non-medical factors that influence health outcomes, including income, education, neighborhood, and access to care. And we know that keratoconus affects the cornea, but we also find it very important to look beyond the cornea. And that is because keratoconus affects people differently depending on where and how they live, and not just how the cornea is. So some people get diagnosed and treated early, and others face long delays. So the point of the study is to look at how we can make it fairer for everybody and try to get better outcomes for everybody involved. So what did we do? We looked for studies across the world answering these questions, and we combined results from 22 studies which covered over 600,000 people in 10 countries. So we looked at their social determinants, including money, education, where people live, etc., and try to see how they affect and relate to keratoconus treatment and outcomes. So what did we find? We found that people from minority backgrounds are often diagnosed later and with more severe disease. People with lower income, and in some countries, if they have less insurance coverage, found it harder to access treatment and were more likely to need a corneal transplant. And we also found that people who are slightly less health literate or have language barriers with their healthcare providers had more missed follow-ups. And this is true even when the clinics are nearby, and especially true when the cost and experience of dealing with their healthcare system can affect these circumstances. So what can we do? So first of all, coming from a policy perspective, from a more systemic perspective, there's a few things we can do. So we can offer early screening for high-risk groups. We can try to cover the cost of lenses or travel when possible for these patients. We can try to provide flexible hours in clinic. So for example, some people work shift work or work multiple jobs. So flexible hours will help in that circumstance. Or interpreters if people speak a different language to the mainstream language in that society, and provide clear patient education so that everybody's on the same page. And we should definitely aim for equal outcomes and not just equal access. And that is especially true because each patient may be starting at a different point in the same system. So the more important thing is, if you are experiencing keratoconus, what does this mean for you and what can you do? So we have to acknowledge the fact that there are systemic inequalities and systemic barriers. So definitely we need to start there. But also if you have keratoconus, there are also some things that you can do from your end. So we can try to work as a partnership between healthcare providers and people experiencing keratoconus. And we know that your background should not decide your outcome. So there are a few things we can do. So first of all, ask about treatment options. Definitely know and ask your doctor or your optometrist or whoever is helping you in this situation, especially if you're unsure or if you're newly diagnosed or sometimes when there are time constraints. And let your healthcare provider know if you're facing any difficulties or need any help, and share your experience with others to guide future improvements. So For example, this webinar where we're having our club and we're discussing with people who are involved is a very good starting point to share your experience and try to improve the understanding of keratoconus and improve outcomes for everybody. So thank you for listening to my talk today.
Thank you very much, Ruby. I hope we can all find a way through, no matter what part of our journey we're in. We're next going to introduce Tiffney. Dr. Tiffney Nesakumar is a junior doctor based at Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane, currently undertaking a Master of Philosophy. Her research focuses on the epidemiology of keratoconus in far north Queensland, with a particular interest in the role of ultraviolet UV exposure in disease prevalence and progression. Passionate about bridging clinical practice and research, Tiffney aims to contribute to improved diagnostic and management strategies for corneal disorders in diverse populations. Thanks, Tiffney.
Thanks, Michelle, and hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. So I'm going to talk about a quick overview of a recent review I did with Dr. Kandel and Professor Watson, exploring how sunlight exposure may influence keratoconus and what that can mean for prevention and care. We know that rubbing your eyes, allergies, and genetic disorders can increase your risk of keratoconus. But recently, we are also looking at whether the environment, like how much sunlight you're exposed to, might play a role too. We have found that the reported prevalence of keratoconus seems to be higher in hot, sunny regions like the Middle East, India, and parts of Africa. Furthermore, animal studies show that UV radiation can damage the cornea, and it hasn't been shown to directly cause keratoconus, though, in these models. Since there's no existing reviews that has explored this link, we aim to fill that gap. Understanding this connection could improve sun protection advice and potentially open doors to treatment strategies. We undertook a comprehensive review to research studies we could find up to June 2025. Initially, we identified 7,700 papers in total, and through a systematic approach, we narrowed it down to 20 studies that look closely at UV exposure and keratoconus. What did we find? 8 of the studies looked at patient-reported sunlight exposure and whether that was linked to keratoconus. The results were mixed. 7 studies found no connection at all, even in sunny places like Iraq, Iran, Trinidad, and Australia. One cohort of Cameroonian school children with a robust sample size identified a 3-fold increased risk with more than 8 hours weekly sunlight. We appreciate that different studies measured sunlight exposure in different ways. Some asked about hours per day, others asked about time spent outdoors, which doesn't always mean direct sun exposure. Many studies didn't consider skin tone or eye colour, which can affect how UV light gets filtered in the eye. And furthermore, we had one study in the UK which found that people of South Asian background were much more likely to have keratoconus than their Caucasian counterparts, even though they lived in the same place, and this pattern was similar in the New Zealand Maori populations. This suggests that genetics and ethnicity might be just as important as sunlight exposure. We pulled 3 studies that looked at whether wearing sunglasses made a difference. The results show no strong link. People who have sunglasses weren't significantly less likely to have keratoconus. Other habits like wearing hats or staying in the shade also didn't show a clear protective effect. But again, these studies didn't always account for occupations or how much time people actually spent in the sun. We looked at biomarkers. One was a biomarker of time spent outdoors that has been validated in myopia studies, and it's called conjunctival ultraviolet autofluorescence, or SUVAF. Interestingly, people with higher SUVAF levels were actually less likely to have keratoconus. This might mean that some UV exposure helps strengthen the cornea naturally, kind of like how UV light is used in corneal cross-linking treatments. We also looked at serum vitamin D levels, which your body makes when your skin is exposed to sunlight. In a pooled results of 4 studies, we found people with keratoconus had much lower vitamin D levels than those without. This is backed by recent studies showing a link between vitamin D level and disease severity, and there is new research looking at the role of supplementation to address vitamin D deficiency. So what does this mean for you? First, the link between sunlight and keratoconus isn't simple. It's not just about how sunny your environment is, it's also about your genetics, your habits, and your overall health. Most studies didn't measure UV exposure in the same way, and many didn't account for things like ethnicity or occupation. That makes it hard to draw firm conclusions. To really understand how sunlight affects keratoconus, we need better studies, ones that use wearable UV sensors, ask detailed questions about our sun habits, and track vitamin D levels over time. We also need to look at how genetics and the environment interact, and this could help us create personalized advice, like who might benefit most from sun protection. Thank you for being here today and for taking an interest in this research. Understanding how sunlight exposure can affect keratoconus is still a work in progress, but it's an exciting area that could lead to better prevention and care. And I hope this talk gave you useful insights into this new area of research.
Thank you for your insights, Tiffany, and we wish you all the best with further studies that you'll be participating in as well. Our next speaker is Ethan Wilkinson, and Ethan is a doctor currently working as a medical registrar within the hospital and outreach setting in the Northern Territory. He's passionate about addressing the health disparities faced in rural and remote Australia, which has led to his research in AI-based solutions. Outside of work, Ethan is an avid diver, mountaineer and runner, and he's taken time out tonight to come and speak to us. I should say today, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. Today we'll be discussing our research on the ability of artificial intelligence to predict and diagnose post-operative outcomes in corneal transplantation. Firstly, I thought it would be important to discuss artificial intelligence as a tool which is being rapidly adopted throughout medicine. In ophthalmology, it has become increasingly used for purposes such as in automated detection of diabetic eye disease in screening programs in rural and remote communities. Though its role in corneal transplantation is less clear. There are many forms of artificial intelligence, as you can see in this diagram, which can be broadly divided into machine learning, which in our study performs most of the risk factor-based analysis, or deep learning, which in our study is involved in image interpretation. Our research sought to identify the ability of all forms of artificial intelligence in predicting and diagnosing outcomes post-corneal transplant. We applied a search strategy to 4 databases with results exported to a review software called Confidence. 2 independent reviewers, including myself, applied the specified inclusion and exclusion criteria found on the left. This provided a total of 17 papers for data extraction as seen in the diagram on the right. These papers were then subsequently extracted into 4 categories, those being papers which assessed imaging-based diagnosis of outcome, imaging-based prediction of outcomes, risk factor-based prediction of outcomes, and lastly, in identifying novel risk factors. Of these 4 subcategories of paper, the most studied was the imaging-based diagnosis of outcomes. 6 papers reported the performance of 14 AI algorithms, which can be seen here on the x-axis, in diagnosing complications of corneal grafting. Reported sensitivities and specificities of the AI, which can be seen on the y-axis, predominantly exceeded 90%. Interestingly, this was found to be similar to the performance of 2 independent expert ophthalmologists. Various types of AI, which are again plotted on the x-axis, were evaluated for risk factor-based prediction of outcomes with mixed results, ranging from poor specificities and sensitivities less than 70% to specificities and sensitivities greater than 90%, again present on the y-axis. Of the other 2 subcategories of paper assessed, imaging-based AI prediction of outcomes was found to be equal or exceed the ability of expert ophthalmologists, whilst the results of AI identification of novel risk factors was again mixed. The implications for this research are vast, ranging from improving rural and remote service provision with teleophthalmology, progression towards personalised transplant medicine, and in improving clinical efficiency to maximise time spent with patients. Additionally, AI-based automation promises to enhance clinical efficiency within the clinic and optimise corneal transplant bank resource management. Limitations of our paper include heterogeneity in reported outcomes and algorithms used, and poor generalisability of many of the papers included. For these potential implications to be realised, further targeted multi-centre research with assessment of real-world outcomes is required. I would just like to finish by thanking all the attendees and my supervisors, Professor Watson and Dr. Kandel, for your time and the opportunity to present today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your talk, Ethan, and spending the time to deliver that to us tonight. It's my great pleasure to actually welcome another keratoconus patient to speak to us tonight. Clare Smith was diagnosed with keratoconus at age 16 and has since navigated a journey filled with both challenges and growth. Over the years, she's undergone corneal cross-linking in both eyes, transitioned from glasses to scleral lenses, experienced eye drops in each eye, and most recently has had a corneal transplant. That was in July. Through every stage, though, she's learned to adapt and stay resilient. And now she's sharing her story to support and connect with others on a similar path. Thank you so much, Clare, for sharing your story tonight.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, just making sure I'm not muted. Thank you so much for having me here. I'd like to just start by saying how privileged I feel to be here, sharing my story and journey with you all. My aim tonight is to just share some of the challenges I've faced, but also some of the strategies and changes that I've made to help me live a mostly normal life. So I grew up in Orange, New South Wales, which nowadays is quite a thriving hub, but it didn't have the same accessibility back then that it has now. I was diagnosed, as Michelle said, when I was 16 years old, and after it came about because I'd started complaining to my parents of frequent headaches and bad visions. My local optometrist was a very good family friend of ours, and he was absolutely devastated to tell us what he suspected was going on. He referred me to a local ophthalmologist who confirmed the diagnosis, and then he sent me to an ophthalmologist in Sydney who had more experience with keratoconus. So upon reflection, I believe my keratoconus has come from two main sources. The first is that I was a chronic eye rubber, lots of allergens out in Orange. And secondly, across the years, we believe that it is a bit of a genetic condition in my family, as my nana and many of my cousins have all been diagnosed with keratoconus. So a bit about my journey. I had my first cross-linking on my left eye just before my year 12 exams. And with the changes to my vision and difficulty seeing even with glasses, my high school was very supportive in making changes to the way that things were taught to me and how I participated in the HSC exams, etc. They became aware of things like the glare and the impact of glare on me and the whiteboards, and they noted down what colours were more difficult for me to see so that they were able to change that and make it easier for me. They also made contact with the Board of Studies to get exams in a much larger print, but we didn't realise until I walked into the exams that it meant that my exams were now on a massive A3 piece of paper and were not very subtle in terms of me trying to fly under the radar and not have, too many people know about my difficulties and struggles. In my adult life, I still deal with frequent changes to my vision. We did another cross-linking on my right eye in about 2011. But unfortunately for me, the cross-linking did not seem to slow the progression of the condition. And I guess I graduated from glasses to scleral lenses in about 2014. I guess important context for this next part is I moved to Sydney and was working in childcare. It's relevant, I promise. So I can genuinely say I didn't realise how bad my eyesight was until I got my first pair of sclerals. I had two big moments of realization, and the first was I was in Orange visiting my parents at their property, and we were looking up at the stars, not through binoculars or telescopes. It was just my sclerals in, and I had a massive breakdown. Started crying because I couldn't believe that that was how stars had actually looked. My family all kind of looked at me like I was crazy, mainly because I'm not a very emotional person, but also it then dawned on all of us that it's because I'd never actually seen with such clarity before. The second realization is kind of a little bit funny. I was at work with the babies in the room, and I was changing the nappies, and I set up the nappies, and I realized that there's all these lumps and bumps all over a nappy that I'd never seen before. And I questioned our other staff about when we got new nappies, and they were very, very confused about what I was talking about. And it wasn't until they told me the nappies always look like that that I found out that it wasn't actually the nappies that had changed. It was just me being able to see for the first time. So over the years, I've needed frequent changes to the scleral lenses. I found that the most drastic changes came about for me when I was pregnant with my children. So my optometrists at the time were aware of the changes going on in my body. So we held off on getting new lenses until after my body had, I guess, settled. To see if my eyes would bounce back to what they were. But in both cases, it was necessary to make changes to my scleral lenses post-pregnancy. So I would say so far since 2014, I've probably had at least 10 different sets of scleral lenses. Sometimes I didn't need both eyes at once needing adjusting, but one or two. So I guess fast forward to March 2022, something wasn't right. My contact just wasn't fitting, and I thought it was fogging over. I tried doing a bit of a deep cleanse with it, didn't seem to work. Eventually, I looked into the mirror to try and figure out what was going on, and I found out it wasn't actually the contact lenses, it was my eye. I managed to get an emergency appointment with my ophthalmologist, and they informed me that I'd developed eye drops or a tear in my right eye in the cornea. I didn't really understand much about it. I hadn't heard about it really before, but I was told that it would usually only last about 4 to 6 weeks before it healed up. Unfortunately, this is not the case for me in my right eye. It took me about 3 months later when the light sensitivity started to disappear and I could start to live a normal life again. I found the eye drops to be really quite uncomfortable. Especially when it came to light exposure. It meant I did end up quitting my job and selling my car and stayed at home. My 3-year-old son basically sat in front of a TV all day to keep him entertained. And it was a genuinely really dark time for me in terms of my mental health. I do still have a significant scar on my right eye from the eye drops, but it doesn't impact my vision too much these days. So we decided to eventually decided to have a transplant on my eye, and on the morning of my surgery, I actually woke up with a fever and a really bad chesty cough, so we had to postpone that surgery. We booked in to do the surgery again, and it was probably a good 6 months later, and the week of my surgery, I woke up and tested positive for COVID. So we postponed it again. I took a bit of time off from having my surgery just so I could try to get my mental health back in a good place. I was, starting to get ready to have the surgery. And then in October last year, I guess the unthinkable for me happened, and I developed eye drops in my left eye this time. It happened on the morning that I was supposed to leave for a family holiday to go to my brother's wedding, so I couldn't get in to see a specialist on the day, but I did call a local optometrist and he got me in and confirmed that it was eye drops, gave me some, eye drops and stuff until I could go to see an ophthalmologist. This case, it was not nearly as painful. It didn't last as long, but unfortunately it did cause a significant fog over my entire line of vision. And so around this same time, I started to experience kind of corneal hypoxia or a lot of pain in my right eye. which I was told was corneal hypoxia. So there was not enough oxygen getting to my eye. It meant that I had to, I guess, take a lot of breaks from wearing my contacts in my right eye. And it also meant that I had to take a fairly significant amount of time off work at different intervals whenever it was happening. This really, I guess, caused a lot of concern for my future eyesight, because if I wasn't able to wear contact in my right eye and I had the fogginess in my left eye, I was working with very limited vision. So I started researching what I could do to help my vision, and I got in contact with Keratoconus Australia and had great conversations with both Larry and Michelle. And then I referred myself to Vision Australia and Guide Dogs Australia to see if they would be able to provide me any more help. So Vision Australia were not able to provide help unless it was at a quite significant cost to myself, but Guide Dogs Australia were able to support me. They sent a mobility specialist to help me, and they assessed where my vision was at, and they have determined that I am eligible for a cane, which I do have now to help me get around when I'm unable to wear my contacts. So this year I was finally able to have a corneal transplant on my left eye, as that was the eye with the worst vision. So far my recovery from the surgery has been really smooth. I've had minimal pain, and I'm really excited about what the future will be post-surgery. So, while my journey has had some really significant challenges, I'm left feeling extremely hopeful for the future, with all the new innovations that we're seeing coming forward and making processes easier and smoother. Hopefully, with our continued advocacy, we can see some further financial support for patients and a wider system of supports that are readily available. Thank you for listening to me talk tonight.
What an incredible life you've had, Claire, and it's so incredible also to be able to hear your positivity and the fact that you are able to know where to reach out to also receive the expert help that you need to. And we wish you all the best with your recovery too. I think you're amazing with children as well, and everything that you have to do in your life. The fact that you're able to be smiling here today is a great positive thing for keratoconus patients to see too. Thank you so much, Claire. We're now going to go on and have our next very important speaker. Professor Stephanie Watson OAM, FARVO or FARVO, is a corneal surgeon known for her groundbreaking research in corneal therapies. Professor Watson is the head ophthalmology specialty and head corneal research group, Sydney Medical School, the University of Sydney, and head of the corneal unit, Sydney Eye Hospital. She leads the Save Sight Keratoconus and Dry Eye Registries as the chief investigator. As Chair Australian Vision Research, Vice Chair New South Wales RANZCO, and Secretary to the Asia Pacific Ophthalmic Trauma Society, Professor Watson contributes to policy and advocacy and has been involved with KeraClub since its inception, and she's a dynamite, and we get to hear her again this year. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
No, thank you, Michelle, very much for the kind words of introduction, and it's been lovely to hear all the other speakers, and particularly Claire's story there. I'm now going to share my talk here, and I hope you can all see the slide there. I'm just going to give a little bit of an update about some new things in keratoconus and then present our keratoconus brochure for cross-linking. So it's important when you're reading about new treatments or new approaches to managing keratoconus to consider what evidence there is behind them, because that's how we make decisions in medicine. There's this pyramid of evidence where the very top is the sort of the best way to know that a treatment is safe and effective. And then down below, we have the sort of the beginning studies that help us build on this evidence and help us find the best treatments. So there was a global consensus on keratoconus and ectatic disorders undertaken. And this was a meeting of specialists from across the planet from 4 international corneal societies. And the idea was to get together to review all the evidence available for keratoconus and make some decisions that could be used in clinical practice. Now, one of the key things in keratoconus is trying to tell when the disease is getting worse, and this is called progression of the ectasia or increasing stretching of the cornea. And what this consensus came to was to say that there's progression. You need a change in at least 2 parameters in the cornea, and it's got to be above the magnitude of the testing instrument. So when we image patients with keratoconus, there can be some variability in the results from the imaging because it's hard for the patient often to focus on the machine, and the cornea isn't a standard shape. And so generally we're looking for a change in the front of the cornea, a change in the posterior cornea, or some increased thinning. And the changes have to be consistent over time. But the most important thing to note here is that you don't have to have a drop in vision for the disease progression to be occurring. And that's because the progression may occur in the bottom half of the cornea, where keratoconus is often more common. And then only later on, when it really starts to affect the central areas, does vision drop. Now, this global consensus has recently been repeated, and I was fortunate to be on the panel representing the Australian New Zealand Corneal Society, and we got together to try to update these guidelines and information about keratoconus and ectatic disorders. And these are some of the statements that have come out from this recent exercise. So corneal cross-linking has been recommended for all cases of progression where it's been measured with a corneal imaging device, that is tomography or topography. And in addition to the changes in the anterior and posterior shape, there's also changes in posterior elevation and thinning of the thinnest point of the cornea that can be accepted in terms of progression. Patients with allergy or atopic disease, that means propensity towards allergy, are at higher risk of progression. But this alone is not sufficient for cross-linking. They still should wait until the progression has been demonstrated. There was strong endorsement from the consensus panel on early cross-linking for children at diagnosis if they have keratoconus. And this is due to the high risks of progression at a younger age. Accelerated epithelial off cross-linking was the most common and most supported by the consensus. But they didn't recommend prophylactic epithelium on cross-linking in children or young adults without progression. Okay, the epi-on was not recommended for prevention, but it may still be considered, they said, in adults with milder or less progressive disease. If there's progression after cross-linking, then retreatment could be considered. And we heard a little bit about vitamin D, and you may wonder whether supplements are useful, but they're not really a replacement to treatments such as cross-linking. They're only adjuncts, and the evidence really is still emerging. So there's not enough data there on our pyramid to recommend supplements for keratoconus. But as we've heard today, all patients should be advised to stop eye rubbing, as we think this is linked to progression. This is a recent paper that we published in the British Journal of Ophthalmology, looking at what happens when somebody removes their contact lenses to have measuring to see if they're progressing or not, or to assess their function. And it was very interesting because we found that there's quite variable times when you take your contact lens out to when the cornea sort of normalizes, and that can range from sort of a medium of 2 weeks with soft lenses to up to close to 8 weeks for hard lenses, less for orthokeratology. There's only one study with tinted lenses, and so that was a short time period. So all of this we need to consider when we're determining if there's progression. The time to this contact lens stabilization, the differences we found was influenced by multiple factors, including the lens materials, the water content of the lens, the water modality of the lens, the contact lens fit, and the patient age, and also the method of corneal assessment, whether it was imaging or whether it was also looking at the biomechanics of the cornea. And so when a patient is being assessed without their contact lenses, individualized recommendations should be given based on the patient characteristics and the lens type. And you probably need more than one tool to determine that the readings are accurate and whether there's changing over time. Some of you may have heard of a treatment called corneal allogenic intrastromal ring segments. And what this is when limited amounts of corneal graft tissue are placed within the cornea. And they're ring segments because they're shaped like part of a ring. And generally they're placed, as you can see in this diagram, below the steepest part of where the cone is. And the idea is that these segments can try to reshape the cornea. Patients that may be considered for them are generally those that have failed contact lens wear. The procedure is considered minimally invasive, though there still can be complications, including rejection and melting over the ring. There has been a systematic review that has shown that overall it can improve uncorrected distance visual acuity, corrected distance visual acuity, and also the corneal shape, and that the complication rate is actually relatively low. But we still don't have comparative randomized studies, controlled trials to really know the full efficacy and safety of this treatment, particularly over time. And it's also still being determined the exact nomograms or the exact sort of formula you use when figuring out how much tissue to put in. But the evidence is continuing to grow. Now, corneal cross-linking is used to treat keratoconic corneas by providing them with greater strength. And the concept is that by putting these cross-links between the layers in the cornea, it can be strengthened, and it's said to get up to 300 times stronger. There's been a new drug that's been involved in the cross-linking procedure that some of you may have read about. Not quite sure how to say it, but it could be epioxia, and it's for use in cross-linking. And what it is, it's just another form of riboflavin. So you still have to have the cross-linking procedure. And it was studied in a phase 3 trial where they compared the epioxa against a sham treatment or vehicle. So it wasn't compared with any other riboflavin agents. And in that study, they showed there was a half a unit of flattening compared to the control, and the control got half a unit steeper. So they said, look, overall, there was about a 1 unit in corneal shape difference with the treatment. And there were no serious adverse events reported, where most adverse events were mild and transient. So it looks like this may be a product that can be used in the cross-linking procedure. Ultimately, it would be good to have comparative data to compare it to other riboflavins that are already available in other cross-linking techniques. We've developed this brochure for patients to read on corneal cross-linking and their carers, and it's available on the Keratoconus Australia website. And I'm very grateful to Keratoconus Australia and Larry Kornhauser for helping us develop this brochure. I'll just quickly show you the contents. We have, first of all, we have a 1-page flyer, and this is a very abbreviated version of the brochure for people that don't want to read the full thing. But this does have a QR code to the further information in the brochure. So we go through basically what cross-linking is, and we explain the procedure. We then talk about the effects of cross-linking and how likely it is it will work, whether it can be repeated, which it can, whether both eyes will need to be treated, and then what are the risks of cross-linking and whether it's worth going ahead. We also address the effects of cross-linking in the long term, and also the effects of not having the cross-linking. There are many different types of cross-linking procedures out there, and the evidence is still evolving on a range of them. And we briefly discuss the different types of cross-linking. The most common procedure performed is still epithelium off cross-linking. So we provide some additional information on what will happen during this procedure on the day, and then what will happen after the cross-linking procedure. And then if there's any warning signs, when you should contact your doctor. We also have some what you can do and can't do after the cross-linking procedure, and whether you need to take some time off. So it's very practical information. Cross-linking in children we've highlighted because this is important, as the global consensus has pointed out, that for children, particularly the younger they are, and in the literature, the youngest reported case is something like a 6-year-old, that the younger you are, the longer it is and the higher that you have to progress, and the higher the risk of the progression. The final page talks about the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, which you can ask your clinicians whether they're using, as it helps them to track the outcomes of their cross-linking procedures, but also other procedures such as CARES and laser treatments for keratoconus. Just like to finish by thanking the registries team who really help us keep the registry going. We now have data on over 9,000 eyes, and we're very grateful to their help. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for bringing us up to speed every year on what is incredible research. And it's also very confidence building, I think, as a patient to know that there are so many options that are still being looked at and researched thoroughly by so many of you specialists. And thank you for your time again today. So we're now going to go to Amanda Craze. Amanda is a fundraising professional with over 8 years' experience in the healthcare sector and recently joined the University of Sydney, partnering with researchers at the Save Sight Institute and working closely with Professor Stephanie Watson to support and promote keratoconus research initiatives. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I can. Great. Thank you. Sorry, I can just see myself. Oops. Sorry. Thank you very much, Michelle. It's a pleasure to join today and share some insights into the role of philanthropy supporting keratoconus research. So in Australia, eye research receives funding through a combination of public and private sources. Public funding comes from government agencies such as the National Health and Medical Research Council and the Medical Research Future Fund. These are government schemes providing grants and fellowships to support researchers. Researchers applying for these schemes currently have about a 6 to 10% success rate where they are competing nationally across all research themes, which is extremely competitive. This can lead to critical research not receiving funding and further reducing the opportunity for treatments or a cure. Private funding comes from individuals, family foundations called PAFs, and community grants. The challenges that our researchers face is that it continues to be difficult to secure prioritised funding for eye research. Yet collectively, eye diseases continue to impact millions of individuals globally with limited therapeutic options or opportunities for a cure. And as Larry mentioned earlier, 1 in 84 people in Australia live with keratoconus, so it is not rare. With limited funding sources available for keratoconus research, and competing with all of the other global health challenges, we have to seek funding from generous individuals and foundations to advance Professor Watson's team's progress to research keratoconus. The cost of research can be a significant challenge, like cutting-edge research such as clinical trials or genetic studies and developing therapies is incredibly expensive, and a lack of awareness and support means less access to therapies. So how philanthropy can help is that donations and advocacy supporting this important research plays a vital role in helping the keratoconus team. Secure funding accelerates progress, patient access to therapies, and provides better quality of life and advances global patient impact. Professor Stephanie Watson and Himal Kandel are the only team leading keratoconus research in Australia. So if we have secure, longer-term funding sources, this helps to ensure that all topics covered by our speakers today can continue to be funded. We can continue to attract and retain top talent. We can continue to prioritise keratoconus research based on the greatest patient need and impact, and ensuring long-term research is supported to enable meaningful data collection for advancing these therapeutics and patient quality of life outcomes locally. So no matter how large or small a donation, supporting keratoconus research makes a difference today and into the future. There are various ways to support the research team through considering a single gift or a regular monthly donation. You can donate through your workplace giving program if you've got one. You could consider a gift in your will. It's a meaningful way to contribute to future keratoconus research. Or a larger philanthropic gift can help secure sustainable funding to tackle the challenges spoken about this evening. Every dollar donated to keratoconus research supports advances in diagnosis, treatments, and brings us closer to the cure. If you or someone in your networks would like to learn more about supporting keratoconus research, please do get in touch via my details provided on the screen, and I'll be happy to chat through any questions you may have, or feel free to leave a message in the chat on this webinar. If you would like to donate today, you can see a QR code on the screen, and we would welcome any feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. We're now going to have our question and answer time, panel discussion, and I would like to welcome Professor Stephanie Watson to moderate this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. If all the panel could pop their cameras on and audio, that'd be great. And if anyone listening has some questions, please pop them in the Q&A. The first question we have here is from somebody asking about, when they see new patients with keratoconus or embarking on surgery, feeling super worried and daunted by the journey ahead. What is there anything more we can do to ease the fears of fellow patients? Larry and Claire, do you want to comment there? Or Larry?
Yeah, well, that's what we've been trying to do for a very long time. You can start by just calling us if you want, or sending us an email. We'll try and talk you through what the particular problem is. And the best thing we do in the end is referring you on to the best eye carers to get the best treatment. That's really the thing that resolves most people's issues, I think. As I said, we did set up a mental health working party with Vision 2020 Australia. And there we've set up a web page with all sorts of resources for people who are concerned about their vision loss. And, we can talk you through that as well and see if there's somebody there that can help you out with that. There's all sorts of those sort of options, but ultimately, getting your eyes fixed is going to solve a lot of your problems, and getting the right eye care is the way to go about that.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. That's very wise words. And we've had a few questions about contact lens wear. So perhaps Martin, if you'd like to.
Yeah, most of the questions I've tried to answer live as we've gone along, but the general thrust of it is the high cost of contact lenses because everything's getting more expensive. The very poor coverage from health insurance to pay for contact lenses. And they're not wrong. Like, it's true. Everything's getting more expensive. If we talk about equipment costs going up. These new contact lenses are amazing, but they come at a slightly dearer price point, and they always come to the people that need it the most, or the ones that can least afford it. Trying to get funding for care is really, really hard. And I think all of us need to continue to lobby and to speak to politicians and speak to health insurers to make them aware of the plight of people in Australia and see if we can make change from the grassroots.
Oh, great. Thank you. I can see Claire there now. Do you have any other tips for people that might be worried about their keratoconus journey?
I don't think I have any real tips. I think, like what Larry said, it was really, really helpful for me to be able to speak to people who had been through it, to sort of, I guess, know that I wasn't alone in what I was experiencing. Being able to have a conversation with Larry and with Michelle around, I guess, what the transplant looked like for them really helped put some of that anxiety at bay for me. But I also know that I used to write down questions when I would, if I was up at night thinking of things, and I would use those questions, I guess, to speak to my specialist team and everyone about, what was going on for me, and see if I could get some more in-depth answers from that.
Thank you. Now, another thing that I'd like to ask Dr. Kandel about, like in the Save Sight registries, understand there's patient-reported outcomes being collected. Maybe if you could just explain what that is and the significance.
Thank you, Stephanie. So just like other clinical data, visual acuity, corneal shape, and any other clinical data in the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, we do collect patient-reported outcomes data as well. This is the data that directly comes from the patient. Say we use different validated questionnaires. Like the one Larry mentioned earlier, Keratoconus Outcomes Research Questionnaire. It does have a set of validated questions on different domains of quality of life, and we do collect data and then and track the patient-reported outcomes. As patients come in different clinical visits, we can track patient-reported outcomes as well. And then we in the registry we have a system where it automatically generates a score. So by looking at different visits data, just at one glimpse, the clinician will know whether a patient is doing good in terms of patient-reported outcomes data or not, just like other clinical data, visual acuity, keratometry, and other data.
Thank you. And I very much enjoyed hearing all the presentations from Dr. Chan, Dr. Wilkinson, and Dr. Nemasar. And just wondering, with the social determinants of health and keratoconus, when you were sort of doing that research, did it surprise you in any way?
Yeah, so I did find the results quite surprising. So we already know that across a lot of eye diseases, social determinants, actually most diseases, social determinants are intricately linked to outcomes. But I was very surprised at to what extent the outcomes were affected. So we were seeing very statistically different outcomes for patients who have differing levels of income or differing levels of education, or even to a point where even if they're living closer to clinics or hospitals, their outcomes are still relevant to their social determinants, which is honestly quite surprising for me. So that is also why it's very important to present this research, so everyone's aware of this.
Thank you. And Ethan, do you think AI is coming to our clinic soon?
Oh, I hope so. I think it's a very exciting area, and one that's progressively becoming more and more part of regular practice. It's very much becoming a mainstay of practice in rural and remote areas for things like diabetic retinopathy screening, in which there's been cases such as in the Pilbara, when they've been able to improve diabetic retinopathy screening by 11 times by using automated diabetic retinopathy image interpretation. And so I think if there's a similar sort of algorithm that can be applied to keratoconus, that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, no, definitely. We definitely could advance keratoconus research. And somebody has asked in the chat where can they donate to push more research in Australia. So I don't know whether in a minute, Amanda, you can reshare your slide before we close out. But I'll just ask Tiffany. So, I mean, I guess your research highlights that there's still a lot more work to be done. What do you think is sort of the next direction?
Yeah, it was quite interesting because there was just so many variability between different studies, the measures of UV exposure, the biomarkers used, and I think the next step would be probably, validating a patient questionnaire that we could potentially universally use, and also just I guess more focused on this area. I think climate in general has just recently come into market. There's, new studies about the greenness of cities and if it's associated with keratoconus. So it's a new area of research that I think warrants more focus, really.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Now, we've just posted in the chat a feedback form. If you could please provide us with feedback. It's all anonymized, and it just helps us to understand if we've delivered what you'd like to hear and plan for next year's session. I don't know whether, Amanda, you want to share that slide again quickly.
Yes.
And this is
See that now?
It's coming. There we go.
Does that come up?
Yeah, that's the QR code, or you can talk to Amanda directly. She's very friendly.
I put my answer that person in the chat with my email address. So yeah.
Thank
see
you,
that.
Amanda.
Welcome.
Okay, well, we might pop that slide down and then I'd like to hand it back to Michelle, but thank you everybody for the Q&A.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was another fantastic event. And thank you everyone for being a part of the 10th KeraClub. What a milestone that we've reached. It's been inspiring. We've had a lot of knowledge that's been shared with us, stories from patients as well, and a shared commitment to supporting everyone affected by keratoconus. Events like this remind us that the KeraClub is more than just a webinar. It's also a community built on an understanding, hope and connection with a lot of information that we're able to be given. A huge thank you to all of our wonderful speakers, Professor Stephanie Watson OAM, Dr. Himal Kandel, Martin Robinson, Larry Kornhauser OAM, Ruby Chan, Tiffney Nesakumar, Ethan Wilkinson, Clare Smith and Amanda Craze for sharing your time, your expertise, your experience, your stories. And of course, thank you to everybody behind the scenes of Keratoconus Australia and the Save Sight Institute for making this event possible. Himal has been very busy with coordinating the whole event with all of the teams. And most importantly, thank you to all of you, the patients, the carers and the supporters, for showing up, for sharing, for being a part of this and continuing to remind each other that we're not alone when we're living with keratoconus. I'm so proud to have shared this with you all, and here's to another year of progress, and I look forward to seeing you in the following year's KeraClub. Thank you, everybody.